Check this out. This is literally the coolest flashlight I've ever used. Okay, so we turn it on, and it's a nice, bright, pretty impressive floodlight. Allows me to see everything in a wide area around me. But now watch this. I double tap. This thing is so cool. It becomes a super powerful, super intense laser spotlight. And I can go between super throwy, super floody, or anything in between. Man, this thing is just so cool.
I've genuinely never been so impressed by a flashlight before. This thing, I just think is amazing. This is the Acebeam W35 LEP, kind of a clunky name in my opinion. This is an LEP, or laser excited phosphor flashlight with a diffusion layer.
Now, laser excited phosphor flashlights are incredible because they throw super far, but the issue with these lights is that because they're so intense, you can only see the thing that you're directly illuminating. There's no area illumination. And so that normally necessitates that you also carry a floodlight with you in addition to that. The issue with floodlights is they can't go very far. So the holy grail, if you will, is to combine the two of these. Now, some lights like this are hybrids. They have both flood LEDs and throw LEDs. And I mean, these are pretty cool. I think they do a good job of getting both of those things. But the issue with a light like this is that it's essentially a compromise, both on the floodlights and on the throw light.
Now, there's a couple other ways of getting the same effect of having both in one light. One is to have a zoom feature like this, where you take a floody LED, put a zoom lens, focuses the light. You're probably familiar with these types of flashlights. They're okay, I don't really like them that much, but they get the job done. The other thing you can do is take a really throwy light like an LEP and then add a diffuser in front of it to turn it into a floodlight. This is something we saw from a light built by Neil's Gadgets, which Matt reviewed a while ago. I actually had some time to play with it too. The idea was you had an LEP, which I believe was actually built by Acebeam, and then there was a filter that threaded onto the front of it, which turned it into a floodlight.
In light DL1 high mode. Filtered in light DL1 high mode. Low.
This diffusion system worked pretty well. I'd say it's even a bit floodier than the Acebeam is, but the beam quality wasn't great. One thing that really stands out to me is this small hot spot right in the center of the beam that still throws quite a bit, so the diffuser doesn't quite get rid of that. I think the Acebeam does have a better beam quality, and this diffuser does allow more light through, which is nice. There's still a bit of a hot spot in the center of the beam, but it's barely noticeable. That was neat, and it worked pretty well, but it was kind of inconvenient because you had to thread the filter on and off. Meanwhile, the Acebeam has an internal diffuser, which you can adjust with the simple press of a button. A lot more convenient.
This concept of using an electronic diffusion layer in a flashlight isn't new. There was a light made by Manker called the Crown a few years ago that used a very similar technology called an electrochromic lens, and I thought that thing was awesome. It was super cool. But this light is even more interesting than that one, in my opinion, mostly because it uses an LEP instead of a normal LED flashlight. So at its maximum zoom point, it's going to be a lot more intense than any LED light is going to be.
Now the name LC-DEL apparently stands for Liquid Crystal Diffractive Electro-Optic Lens. And I don't really know what that means, but you can see we have this big, clean, clear lens and the emitter down there at the bottom of the light. If we turn the light on and we start to cycle through, you can see that we go from clear to having this kind of grid-like pattern start to appear in there. That's the diffusion. So that kind of, it does block a little bit of light, but it smooths out the beam and gives it that wide, floody beam pattern, and it just looks really cool in there. So you can see it at one extreme there. It's kind of hard to get on camera, but then if I double tap, clears up, and there's just a tiny hint of it left.
This is a really, really awesome way of doing it that uses just a single emitter. So at the very least, you're not compromising on your throw emitter. And in my opinion, it's still a fantastic flutter, but you also get to dial in exactly the level of zoom that you want. Very similar to a traditional zoom light with a lens, But this does it without any moving parts. And just to illustrate how good of an LEP this is, here it is at maximum intensity next to this other big LEP. And you can see, well, I hope you can see, I don't know if it's in focus, but these are both super, super impressive. All right, so the interface on this guy is pretty simple. You turn the light on with this forward clicky here in the rear, and it does this really cool kind of zooming animation when it turns on, which I like a lot. Now the modes are adjusted using the two buttons up here on the head. So the one on the right adjusts output. So just tapping that button increases the output, and then a double tap jumps to turbo. And then the button on the left changes the zoom level. So a double tap will jump between the two extremes, flood and throw, and then a tap will just cycle between the different levels. Now, when you're just tapping through, I do find it to be pretty slow and kind of annoying because the light, there's no way to reverse directions. It'll just go all the way to one end and then back the other way. So if you want to make it more tight when it's getting floodier, then you just have to cycle all the way to one end and back. So I do find that a bit clunky. I think that's something that can be improved. But overall, the interface is pretty simple and pretty easy to use.
Now, normally when we talk about LEPs, we don't care that much about actual lumen numbers because what really matters is how intense the light is. And this one performs pretty well. It's about 630 lumens on turbo at its maximum zoom range. But where lumens are going to matter a lot more is when we talk about floodlights. And because this has a diffusion layer in it, it's definitely going to lose quite a few lumens at its floodiest level. 525 lumens is what I measured on turbo at its maximum flood setting, which is still plenty bright, honestly, but it's definitely a far cry from some of the super powerful floodlights that we often show off on this channel. But I think the bigger issue is coloration. I have never seen an LEP that has good color. They're always an ugly greenish or bluish color. And this is no exception. So I measured it with a Seikonic colorimeter, and it is very blue, over 7,000 K, and it has terrible coloration. Honestly, one of the worst I've reviewed in terms of color. So definitely a factor. For me, that's definitely something I take issue with. I really like warmer emitters, and I definitely like having good color rendering. This is not that at all. These are definitely areas where I would like to see improvements in the future if possible. Even output, I'd be willing to trade a little bit of intensity at its most focused to get some more light when it's floody. As it stands though, I think this is a really good start. And what is really impressive about this light is the performance. Not really a surprise, it's an Acebeam, they always tend to perform well, but we are able to sustain quite a bit of light, and when we're talking about the LEP, quite a bit of intensity for a long time. We've got good run times, good regulation, and because this isn't a hot rod, we're not getting a huge drop on turbo. Now, I did find some slightly weird fluctuations only when using the laser level, which I didn't see repeated in other reviewers, and it didn't happen when I tested it again. So I really think this is just a result of some slightly wonky temperature regulation when I tested it that time. Something to be aware of, you can get those fluctuations over time, but in use, I didn't have any issues with this light. It actually performed very well. Of course, the build is great. It's an Acebeam, so it's gonna be really nice, really durable. However, I really do not like the USB-C charging port on the back of the light right next to the button. Just an annoying place to put it, and it has this rubber flap that comes off way too easily. I wish this was just like up at the head or just had a better cover or something. Now again, we've showed off a lot of LEPs on this channel. I don't currently have anything that actually compares directly to this. I don't have any large LEPs. I've got a couple of smaller ones here. This is also a Neil's Gadgets LEP, but it's not comparable because it's just much smaller. The only thing I have that really compares is this. Now, this is a top secret module. It's a Maglite upgrade made by a company that I will not name. But this thing it's actually pretty comparable. So it's got about the same size diameter head. It's actually a little bit less intense than the Acebeam. Acebeam makes really good LEPs, and this one, very, very impressive. By the way, this is an awesome module. I will be talking a little bit more about this in the future. But yeah, as far as LEPs go, really, really good, really solid. This Acebeam is, I mean, well, that one too. I like it. I think that one's cool. Okay, anyway. As for my personal experience with this light, I've been using it for about 6 months now, and It has become one of my most used and most loved flashlights. Like, this is one of my default options whenever I need a flashlight. I love this thing. It's awesome. Also, this thing, more than any other flashlight that I have, including like the super bright ones, this is the one that always impresses people. Like, just when I'm going on a night hike and I turn this on, everybody thinks it's like the coolest thing ever. And I agree. I think it's sick. So here's the thing. Matt and I have been talking a lot about wanting to focus on more budget flashlights as we continue forward with this channel. And this is not that. It's a very innovative, very high quality flashlight, and you are going to pay for it. So this retails at $340. And because it's so expensive and because of just kind of some of the quirks, it's not necessarily a light I would recommend to everyone. However, I think that price is well justified. I'm actually happy to pay that amount for this light. Again, I think it's very well built, performs great, and the technology is just, I think it's amazing.
From a value point of view, does this make more sense than just buying two separate lights, a thrower and a flutter? So these are just kind of random examples I picked. This is a small LEP light. This is from Neil's Gadgets. I think this is about $170. So again, pretty pricey because it's an LEP. And then this is a small floody flashlight from MSR. This is about $100. So even though these are both pricier options, together they still cost less than the W35. And you can certainly get cheaper lights than this. There are advantages to something like this, just the simplicity and the fact that it's all contained in one unit. But there's also advantages to having separate lights.
LEPs have been and still are quite expensive. Even the cheap ones are pretty pricey. And I'm sure this diffusion tech adds quite a bit to that price as well. So it is what it is. But I definitely want to see that price come down as this tech is implemented in more lights. I want to see this become more available because this is so cool. But for now, this costs what it costs. I will put a purchase link in the description, which is an affiliate link. I'm also going to link a bunch of other stuff. There's a spreadsheet that has a bunch of recommended lights, including a bunch of LEPs and hybrid flashlights. And those are affiliate links as well. You can check that out. And of course, if you're interested in more videos about laser-excited phosphor lights, we've got a bunch of those. We've also got quite a few videos on hybrid lights, comparisons of LEPs and LEDs. Yeah, we got lots of really cool stuff on this channel that you can check out if you're interested in this kind of tech. So thanks for watching this video so much. I hope you enjoy it, and I have nothing else to say.